Good morning. You are listening to National Real Estate Auction Radio. I am your host, Doug Dennison, and we are broadcasting from beautiful St. Augustine, Florida, the nation's oldest city, at WFOY on 1240news.com. The show will be archived on RowellAuctions.com as they are the sponsor of this program. Additionally, this show will be posted on YouTube.com. We're going to be talking about real estate auctions, past auctions, upcoming auctions, different real estate markets across the country. We get a lot of topics today. We're going to hear from Washington, D.C. We're going to hear from Los Angeles, California, and we're going to hear from Georgia. So, exciting show. Want to make sure y'all know that the radio show mission statement is to provide an educational experience for listeners in a promotional format for auctions across the country. The listeners are real estate brokers, they are banking officials, government officials, real estate media, general public, and real estate investors. And I thank you all for listening, and again, an exciting show today. We're going to talk a little bit about the GSA, and we've got a caller that's going to be calling in, Director of the Office of Real Estate Property Utilization, good guy, General Service Administration, Ralph Connor. We're also going to be listening to, in the second half of the show, Nathan Wolfstein, who is the Accelerated Marketing and Predictive Analytics Consultant in Los Angeles, California. And then to wrap up the show, we will have Allison Marchetti from Rowell Auctions give the Rowell Auctions report, upcoming auctions, and also this past week has been pretty busy. I think we sold 79 properties for a bank. All exciting things. You need to make sure that you are always going on to the website for Rowell Auctions. They are our sponsor. They are a national real estate auction firm that started in 1936. They do online auctions, on-site auctions, and ballroom auctions. They have offices in Florida, New Jersey, California, Georgia, and have alliances with auctioneers and real estate brokers across the country. They do government auctions, bankruptcy auctions, and much more. They have a big auction schedule coming up, so check out their website at www.rowellauctions.com, or you can call them at 800-323-8388. That's 800-323-8388. The GSA has been in the news. They are the biggest landlord in the country. They take care of almost a million properties. We'll try to get a better number from Ralph Connor, but a very difficult job. And this is leasing, it's owning, it's disposing. So a big job. Ralph Connor will be on the show shortly and kind of be explaining the process, because they do auctions. They are involved with real estate brokers and auction firms, and I'm excited for Ralph to be on the show today. He's been on the show before, and again, he's been there for a while with the General Service Administration, doing a good job for us, and I appreciate him being on. Again, the second guest is Nathan Wolfstein, who really became the marketing guru for auctions back in the 70s and 80s, and really did a lot of first, and so we'll be talking with him. Let's go to the first caller. Good morning, you're on the air.
Good morning, Doug. It's Ralph Connor from GSA. How are you?
Well, Ralph, I've been introducing you a little bit, but how about you do it for us? Tell us again who you are, where you're from, and what you do, sir.
Sure. Again, I'm Ralph Connor. I'm the Director of Real Property Utilization at GSA. Within GSA, there are two major business lines: the Federal Acquisition Service, which handles most of the government's contracting and contract vehicles, as well as all of their personal property, everything from vehicles to computers to the IT to support those computers to furniture and everything that an organization would need to function and operate. The other major business line is the public building service, of which I am a part. Public building service does everything an agency needs for their real property, everything from the acquisition and construction of buildings to the acquisition of leases, the management of those buildings, the improvement of them, the repairs and alterations necessary, modifications, adjustments, and then at the end of the life cycle, when an agency no longer has need for property or mission shift or there's relocations or economies advantages that can be taken advantage of, and properties need to be repositioned out of the federal inventory, that's where my organization comes in. And we work not only with the Public Building Service, but with every federal landholding agency, help them better understand the assets they have, and look at how to maximize and optimize those assets. So part of that looks at, are there efficiencies to be achieved through consolidation or relocation? Have missions shift, have demographics changed in such a way that you no longer need to be located where you are? Or are buildings just simply antiquated and we can't justify holding on to them anymore? So at that point, in that analysis, we provide a lot of the analytical tools to help drive those decisions. And then more importantly, we help develop the strategies and then the execution of those strategies to reposition those properties out of the federal inventory. So, we're involved in a pretty diverse range of properties, everything from general purpose standalone office buildings to warehouses to entire military bases, installation, lighthouses, residential properties to unimproved open space, antenna arrays. I mean, you name it. If the federal government is constructed on it or owns it and has determined that they no longer have a mission need for it, we are involved.
Okay, we lost Ralph there. I'm not sure what happened. Hopefully he'll call back. Exciting stuff. I've been looking at a agency breakdown of. He said he deals with all the federal lines of government and their rebuilding, their building needs, and also their disposal needs, and that's a lot of different departments. Department of Agriculture, Department of Commerce, Department of Defense, Department of Education, Energy, Health and Human Services, Homeland Security. I mean, the list just goes on and on. And so hopefully when he calls back, we'll try to get a better read on what the process is, because it is very, very, I guess, intense. You just don't say, hey, here's a property and, put up a for sale sign. You got to go through a whole bunch of things. Let's see if we can get them back on again. Good morning. You're on the air.
Yes, Doug. Sorry, I was really on a roll there, and then I realized I was no longer on the air.
All of a sudden I hear the dial tone. I said, I wonder if he's still talking and doing a great job as
Oh, it was really entertaining stuff.
Yes, I'm sure it was very entertaining, Ralph. During that break, I was talking about all the different agencies that you help and deal with, and that there's just a ton of them. And I was wondering if you can kind of tell us what happens. Let's say the Department of the Interior has a building they no longer need. What is the next step when you decide, what's the next step? Are you going to go to different agencies, see if they have the needs? Are you going to dispose of it? Do you have to go through any process?
That's a great question. And, I back it up just one step for that. What we're doing, a lot of what we're doing is we're working with every federal landholding agency, helping them to better understand their assets.
Okay.
Now, as you can imagine, as with any large organization or organizations, some agencies are very sophisticated and have all the tools and staff and personnel to do that and have those regular looks and are really engaged in real strong portfolio management, and they're making these decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Other agencies, it's not their mission to be asset managers and property managers, so they don't always have the strength there. They focus their strength and limited resources on their mission. So oftentimes we're called in and asked to help them analyze, all of their properties in, say, the Southwest, right? And we're going to take a look at them and get an understanding of where there are commonalities, how this mission can be delivered, and can we take 12 properties and reduce that footprint down to 4 or 5 or down to 3, whatever the right number is based on an analysis. So let's say we're talking about the example you used, the Department of Interior.
Mm-hmm.
They come to the conclusion that they don't need to be in these 8 buildings in this area. They could probably function very, very effectively in just 3 as opposed to 8. So the question then becomes, what kind of a strategy do we develop to reposition those, and we'll call it, from 8 down to 3, those 5 unneeded assets? So the first step we'll get engaged in is understanding what makes the most sense in the real estate move of that agency. Now, next, we're going to look at what authorities are available. If the agency itself has some of its own authorities, we want to take a look at the use of those authorities as opposed to the other authorities that are out there. GSA brings to the table its own authority, but we're not so myopic on our own authority that we believe it's the best and it's the only one that'll work.
Mm-hmm.
We're really agnostic on what authority we use. We're really focused on what realty outcome are we after. So once we figure out among the available authorities, sometimes there are 3, 4, 5, other times there's only the one. So first step is understand what authority makes most sense to achieve the outcome you want. Now we begin to go through it. In the example that you began to talk about, let's say the Property Act is what we determine is either the best or the only available authority. In that instance, the agency that no longer has need for that property is going to develop what we call a report of excess. A report of excess sounds like, an internal government document. It's really just realty due diligence.
Okay.
How was your property acquired? When was it acquired? What were its past uses? What encumbrances are over the property? We're looking for marketable title and regulatory closure so we can move the property through. Once we have our hands around that, we get a good understanding of the real estate basics, then what we'll do under the Property Act process is we do a federal screening. We make it available to every other federal agency. How many, the agencies that have authority to hold property, we go to their senior real property officers and say, give them a description of what this property is. It's all done electronically and pretty fluidly. Let them know that they have 30 days to express interest in that property. 30 days pass and no federal agency expresses interest, then the property goes from being excess to the needs of the agency that reported it to surplus to the needs of the government, and we move into a new process.
And
I point that out because you hear excess, surplus, utilized, underutilized, all used as kind of synonyms for one another.
Yep.
But in the statutory world, they connote steps in the process. So an excess property is different from a surplus property in that it speaks to who would have opportunity to acquire it. The public would never have, the private sector would never have an opportunity to acquire an excess property. They would on a surplus property. So nuancey, nerdy, inside government real estate stuff, but I hear the terms used all the time interchangeably, and depending on the context, they may not be interchangeable. It may not be synonyms for one another.
Well, once you decide it is surplus and you want to offer it to the private sector,
right,
what do you do then? Because I know you got to go through a whole bunch of hoops.
Well, there's the hoops, the statutory process that we operate under, what we call the Property Act,
right,
has certain process steps and priorities of consideration. But I guess it's important to understand that whether you are disposing of the property or repositioning it through the Property Act, which is, our authority,
right,
or you're doing it under some special legislative authority saying this property shall go directly to sale, or if an agency has authority to take property directly to sale, like, there are certain agencies out there that have that authority. The thing that can't be lost is all of the regulatory requirements, all of your environmental, your historic, your endangered species, any of these issues, they all have to be addressed. Simply going directly to sale doesn't give you relief from the environmental laws, CERCLA, RCRA, TSCA, Endangered Species Act, Wetlands Act, Coastal Zone Management. If it's historic elements of the property, you have historic preservation consultations that need to take place. None of the law, any new authority or any new law that comes up that says, take this property directly to sale, still has to satisfy all of those things. So what we look to do is, as we're moving through our process, we're addressing those things concurrently. So we try to eliminate as much as possible kind of the successive elements. So if a property has some questionable environmental impairment, we're going to, as we're analyzing that, we're going to be moving through this process.
Okay.
All right. So ideally, that when we get to that end state where we're looking to get to a public sale, we've conducted all the analysis, we have all the information gathered, we understand exactly, use the example of environmental, we know what's in the ground, what it's doing, and what the concentrations are. And that's important to the private sector,
right?
Because they want to be able to monetize what the cost of this acquisition is going to be if they're going to take on that environmental piece.
Right.
This environmental data is very important to regulators because in order for us to transfer a property out of federal ownership, we have to work closely with the state regulators. They're going to want to understand. So everybody is much more willing to work together when they have all that information out there. It's very problematic if you're asking a regulator to sign off on something and you don't have very good characterization. It's nearly impossible to get the private sector to buy something if you don't have good information about what's on that. So, it really works towards kind of a mutual gain between the various stakeholders, the state regulators, the private sector buyers, and the government who's looking to reposition. So we spend a lot of time working through those things. Environmental is one. I'd say environmental is a long pole in the tent. But when you have, when you have a historic property, you may have an industrial property with some historic,
right?
That is a historic resource. It may have been designed by a famous architect or something, or had an important mission that went on in there. That property, it could be in a real good location, but it has historic features to it. So we have to make sure that the historic features are preserved. So how do we work that deal wherein an adaptive reuse, where a new owner can come in, modify that building, preserve the historic integrity while changing the use. So taking an old industrial building and turning it into like condos.
Right.
All right. So there's going to be some changes to that building. Can those two things occur? So what we look to do is try to add as much certainty or bring as much certainty to that transaction as we can. So there's all kinds of regulatory intersections with disposition of property out of federal ownership.
You've got everybody tries to help out the homeless too. It's a big issue. How do you deal with that?
Well, that's when it's coming through the Property Act.
Right.
Property Act is has statutory linkage to what they call the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act.
Okay.
In that, when we get that report of excess and we begin that federal screening, the first thing we do statutorily is we conduct what they call a HUD suitability. So the Department of Housing and Urban Development looks at whether or not a property is suitable to meet the needs of the homeless. Whenever we're repositioning a property, we go out and we do a site visit. So the realty specialist goes out there, visits the property, and one of the things that they'll do is put together this HUD suitability checklist. So we'll go through it, and there's a variety of questions that HUD wants answered to make a determination about suitability. As you can imagine, most properties are deemed suitable for the homeless.
Right.
So upon that determination, if it's deemed unsuitable, then we're going right past it. We're not making it available for homeless. If it is deemed suitable, then we screen for 60 days for homeless use. And this is for homeless providers. And, think of, the American Red Cross or the Salvation Army or, large churches in the area, entities that, provide homeless assistance, not to, homeless individuals, obviously. So that's a 60-day period. Within that 60 days, entities that I just described would express interest to us, and then we'd get an application to them. That application would go back to the Department of Health and Human Services, who would review that for adequacy, sufficiency, a demonstration of understanding of how you're going to take a an obsolete office building and turn it into transitional housing where your financing would come from, what your past performance would be. And if they approve that application, and in that instance, HHS would request assignment from GSA, we would assign the property to HHS, and HHS would deed it to the homeless entity. So, complex property, a couple of steps in there. Complex process, a couple of steps in there, but, that's the way that works. But, a lot of people raise concerns and ask questions about the homeless. And they should. Anytime, we as transactional managers look to employ the discretion to make the deal work. With the homeless process, we have no discretion. If we have to screen, we have to make a determination about suitability. If suitable, we must screen for homeless. And if an application is approved and an assignment is requested, we must assign. Now, since 1987, when the law was enacted, it's only about 2% of our properties actually go to the homeless. They all get the HUD suitability determination, and a lot of them are deemed suitable.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, when you're talking about a 200,000 square foot building that has functional obsolescence and needs systems replacements, may be historic.
Yep.
It's really difficult for a not-for-profit homeless group to come in there and invest what limited dollars they have in the renovation and restoration of an old office building, an old warehouse. So
they don't have the budget to deal with it, and I know. Listen, we're gonna end up this show. I know you and I could talk for hours, but you do auctions. You do very unique properties. I've gone on your website before. Here's a lighthouse that you're selling, and over here an office building. How do people find out about your auctions, Ralph?
We sell all of our properties on a website called realestatesales.gov. And, give you an idea, over the last, let's say 6 years, I did some quick numbers.
Okay.
We've got about over 1,100 transactions, over 1,100 deals.
Wow.
In the last 6 years.
Okay.
So, you're talking about 180 a year, something like that.
Yep.
And, that generated something like $350 million. So, there are a lot of properties moving through there. As you point out, Doug, it's as diverse a range of assets as you could imagine. Everything from a lighthouse to an office building to a warehouse to a military base or an industrial facility, and residential properties and even open space. So it really covers the whole gamut.
Ralph, give us the website one more time, because I know you've got a meeting, and I want to make sure that you make that meeting. But what's the website one more time?
realestatesales.gov.
Very good. Ralph, thank you so much. And you and I are both from Boston. We've met each other a couple of times up in Washington, D.C. I appreciate all the hard work you do. You have a great weekend, sir.
Anytime, Doug. Thanks.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Enjoy your weekend. Bye-bye.
Thanks. All right, that was Ralph Connor, Director of the Office of Real Property Utilization of the General Services Administration, which is GSA, Washington, D.C. I think what you and I as listeners and interviewer can take from this is a pretty complex process. It's not like, hey, we want to sell the property, put up a sign. So good job, Ralph. Appreciate all your hard work. We're going to go for a quick break, and we will be right back. All right, we are back. You're listening to the National Real Estate Auction Radio Show. I am your host, Doug Dennison. We've just heard from Washington, D.C., the head of the Office of Real Property Utilization for the General Services Administration, GSA, called in. And I asked him, what do you got to do to sell a property? And he went and did a great job trying to explain to me, and therefore to you, all of the different things that you have to do as a government agency because of the laws. And so good job, Ralph. I thank you. Let's go to our next caller. Good morning. You're on the air.
Yes, Doug. Nathan Wolfstein.
Hey, Nathan. Well, good to hear from you. Nathan, tell us again who you are, where you're from, and what do you do, sir?
Well, I live in Los Angeles, California, and I'm an auction marketing director. But today, I specialize in doing predictive analytics consulting based on what we learned in the 90s and early 2000s in the sale of real estate via the auction method.
Well, tell us exactly what that is. What is the predictive analytics consultant? Again, we've got general public, we've got real estate brokers, we have real estate investors, bankers listening to the show. What does that mean? What does a predictive analytics consultant do?
Well, in a nutshell, Doug, what we do and what I look at is all of the things that were done previously that impact the dynamics of what needs to be done today in order to make resolution or the conversion of assets from an inventory situation, whether it's a government or private sector inventory, and get it out of inventory and convert it back to an owner or in a bulk sale situation. Over the years, our data and analysis and frontline actions score for over 150,000 homes, hundreds of commercial assets, and portfolios of non-performing loans. For when we did all the major government auctioneers through the Ross Dove Company and Larry Latham Auctioneers, there's a lot of learned experiences that are very, very similar that just need to be updated to today's criteria of value and interest rates. So that's what we look at to talk about what should we do today, and it's based on what actually worked in the past.
Well, you and I go back a long way, and it's hard to believe we're so young. But you got into the auction industry in 1979. I think I got into the auction industry about 85. And so you're a little bit ahead of me, but you really were on the edge of starting something big. And I'm going to generalize here that auctions perceived by the general public as okay, nice to go and buy an old lamp or go to a farm, and all of a sudden, with your expertise and your marketing experience, you helped auctioneers say, hey, you can do this in a big way for real estate and for loans and satellite, some big stuff. And again, you worked with the VA, HUD, FDIC, RTC, Department of Defense. I mean, big stuff. And so, number one, I want to thank you for helping all of the auctions and making auctions a better known entity to the general public, and really kind of helped us get on to the next phase. And so, how did you get into that, and how did you make that big jump for the auction business to say, hey, we can use this process, it's fair, it's transparent, and we're going to do it for government agencies in a big way?
That's a great question. Here's the answer. When I started, I really didn't have an expertise in auctions. I was trying to sell printing,
mm-hmm.
and so I was trying to help the auctioneer to market the assets that they had. And really, if you go back to the beginning, it was auction visionaries like Ross and Kirk Dove, and especially Larry Latham, that saw the value in what I was talking about and proposing, and then they opened the doors. And that was the secret, because they needed something unique, something different that they could include in their proposals to, at that time, like with Larry Latham in 1981, winning the first ever government 5-year program to sell foreclosed real estate assets in the portfolio. Larry said, I need something that will really propel this, because the market said auctions fire sales. And what we developed, which is really the essence of what you're talking about, was the term the auction method of marketing. And then from there, we were able to package it, present it, and show this is not a fire sale method. This is the method you should use first, because it builds competitive bidding, it builds momentum, it gets publicity, and that's what it takes to sell these assets for whatever the highest value of that particular asset is at a given moment in time, i.e. the auction. Over the years, we then got bolder and made other strategic partnerships. For instance, the Ross Dove Company made a strategic partnership with Grubb & Ellis Real Estate, and we then went to the FDIC and talked to them about having a satellite broadcast auction of commercial real estate. The first, there was three of them, $500 million, $850 million, and $500 million respectively. But at the time that we proposed it, the essence was it was a great plan, but there was no internet. And it was very, very difficult to get television broadcast and uplinks and downlinks and connect live bidders in 5 sites simultaneously. Whereas you see today, that's not anywhere near as difficult to do. But when you get back to predictive analytics, all the lessons we learned at that time, when it was much, much more difficult, can now be employed so we can do things better, faster, cheaper because of technology.
Internet has changed the whole world in a big way, and certainly the auction method. What are your thoughts for the future? You know that you've been through many downturns, ups and downs in the real estate business, and what do you think the future holds in regards to auctions and also different areas in the country that are going to need our help?
Well, to be honest with you, Doug, I can't understand why the government or agencies of the government or investors of large portfolios aren't employing the auction method of marketing. And when you're moving into a upswing in the market, meaning the property values are stabilized and starting to move up, there is no better method than the auction method to sell into that market. And Americans probably are the most competitive people in the world, and when you put them in a ballroom, if there's going to be somebody to get the best deal, that's how they're going to do it.
Yep.
And so I can't believe that we aren't seeing the same kind of auction method of marketing and auctions that like Larry Latham conducted for HUD and Fannie Mae and FHA and all the rest. I don't understand why they're not doing that, but let's put it this way. I think there are auctioneers and there are technology people and there are consultants like myself that are ready to really show how the auction method of marketing can save the day again.
Well, there's certainly enough properties out there, and again, I'm going to say in the last 4 or 5 years, some of those properties have not shown up. They've been kind of put on the back burner to try to help the economy get better. I don't know if that was a good idea or bad idea. I know the RTC, which you were involved in, the Resolution Trust Corporation, that seemed to be a very big movement to help the auction process become a more viable entity as far as the public and the investors came, because most of those properties were absolute, and the ballrooms just filled to the maximum. I remember having to turn people away, which is pretty disgusting, but pretty amazing at the same time. We were in Washington D.C. and the had room for like 1,200 people for 200 properties. And the fire marshal came in and said, no more people in here.
Yes, well, you know what? I remember those days when people came and they were required to put up $3,000 cash.
Yes.
So people showed up we had hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash, and you had to put up $3,000 $3,000 for each property that you wanted to bid on.
Yeah.
The other part of that is that's very interesting is we sold 100% of the inventory that we were offering, and in many cases for an average consolidated aggregate of over 100%, even as high as 104, 105% of what the agency selling it was valuing it on their books for.
Right.
And one of the other very interesting facts of the big FDIC National Satellite Commercial Real Estate auctions are that they didn't really have a fire sale, but when you look at it years later, all of the properties that were bought at the auction method, at the auction, were appreciated greatly for all of the buyers. So not only did the government take it off the books, but they put it back into the private sector,
Yes.
and then the appreciation level really started. So it was a major boost for the local and the national economy.
Well, you did many firsts. I had a couple of firsts, but one of them was doing the first FDIC commercial auction back in '87 for the Tampa FDIC office, and one of the stalwarts of the FDIC, A.J. Felton, was in charge of that office, and everybody said it didn't work, and yet it was highly successful, just like your auctions were. So I wanna thank you for again being really stepping out there to try something new, to convince people. You said that Americans are very competitive. Well, they're also kind of slow to change sometimes too, and it takes a real salesman and a real professional with passion to make that happen. So good job. What are you doing now? I'm reading here the Dennis Hill Real Estate Finance Solution to provide a viable and proven finance solution to the housing crisis. You working on something big there, I'm sure, as you always do.
You know, I appreciate it. We've been working on it for about a year now with one of my old associates, Kenny Fisher, from the Ross Tubb Company. Dennis Hill is a lawyer, and was a lawyer back in the 90s that created a finance solution that he employed that we are looking at as a way to have a unique element of financing, but resolve the financing, which means, you know, that basically the term would be, it's the unshort sale variable to financing. Dennis did a lot of it with Fannie Mae and hasn't used the actual system and program since, the mid-1990s.
Mm-hmm.
So what we've done is we've gone back in and recalculated all of the application methods for current pricing and interest rates. And it's still, it would be a very, very viable agreement, way for people to proceed. And what Kenny and I are doing is looking at how can we apply it to the auction method of marketing, and thereby work with an auction company or companies or a federal agency in order to put it out there and as a major resolution for converting these properties from inventory back to the private sector.
Well, it's all good stuff, and I really appreciate you calling in today. How can people get a hold of you, Nathan?
I'll tell you the best way is to send me an email at naw1111@aol.com and put auction in the subject line.
Okay. Give that email to us one more time, Nathan.
That's naw1111@aol.com.
Well, great. It's been wonderful catching up with you. I look forward to working with you down the line. And again, I remember your brochures for industrial publishing back in the 80s, and you were a leader in the auction business way back then, and you still are. So thank you so much for calling in, and have a wonderful weekend, Nathan.
Great, Doug. Thank you so much.
You bet. Take care.
Bye.
All right. That was Nathan Wolfstein one of the real leaders in the real estate auction business. Again, he started back in 1979, founding a printing firm for auctioneers across the country, and he was the man. I mean, if you were going to do a brochure, which you had to back then, you didn't have the internet and the availability to send out, and basically it was call an 800 number, and you saw an ad in the newspaper, and you want to know more about the property, you send out an auction brochure that could be 4 pages long or 40 pages long, and again, he's done a great deal of work for the government, so he and I kind of have a past interest in that. We're hoping that the government sees fit to do more government auctions. It's the most fair way. It's the most transparent way. And I didn't get into it with Nathan on this, but if you're a government employee and have been deemed the person to sell pick a property, a courthouse in Miami, and you've determined that it's, again, courthouses are tough to figure out what they're worth, but let's say it's worth approximately $20 million in your mind anyway, and help of your experts that you've employed and have resources on. Well, when you're marketing that property, you're going to get a whole bunch of different interest saying, hey, I want to do this with the property, but I'm going to need 3 months worth of due diligence to get my people in, to do structural engineering studies and environmental studies, and but I'm willing to pay $20 million. And then somebody else will say, hey, I'm willing to pay $21 million, but I need financing. And I need 70% financing at whatever rate. And somebody else says, well, I will pay $22 million, but I don't have a real big down payment to put on, so I'm going to put a very small down payment, and I'm going to have a long closing period. And so you, as the government employee that's responsible for selling this very important property, have all of these different people who are giving you different apples and oranges as far as offers. And that's very big and very, very difficult. If you pick one, well, guess what? All the other 10 that had some kind of interest cry foul and say, hey, that's not fair. I would have paid more. This was a backdoor, backroom deal. I cry foul. Let me talk to my congressman. So the best way as a government employee is to do it by auction, because it's the fairest and most transparent way. Everything is out in the open. The deposit is going to be the same for everybody. If there's financing or not, that's going to be known. The down payment is going to be the same. If there's any kind of property information, it's out to everybody, and that's the way to do it if I'm a government employee, because if somebody cries foul after that, they just say, well, hey, I'm looking at the reports. We had 10 bidders. We spent X amount of dollars in advertising. Here's all the copies of the ads. We had 3,247 calls and emails of interest on this property. I'm sorry, sir, but we did our job, and I'm sorry you missed out, but there is no foul here. And that really helps you as a government employee, and it really brings credibility to the sale of that property. Let's go on to next caller. Good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning, Doug.
Well, Allison, thank you so much for calling. Tell us who you are and what you do and where you are from.
Okay, my name's Allison Marchetti. I live here in Moultrie, Georgia. I help with customer service here at Rowell Auctions, and I also help as executive producer for the radio show.
Well, you do a fine job in both areas, and I want to thank you. This radio show has taken off under your leadership with the executive producer role. You're with Rowell Auction. Tell us a little bit about Rowell Auction, if you would.
Rowell Auctions is with a Markland Alliance member. They have been in business since 1936. Family, 3 generations. They do on-site, online, and simulcast auctions.
Well, very, very good. You had a busy week this week. Tell us what happened in the Rowell auction world.
We had several auctions. 2 days out of the auctions, we had absolute auctions that were online and ballroom as a simulcast. They went very, very well. And being absolute, lots of interest.
Well, absolute, what does that mean again?
It means no minimum, no reserves. It will go to the highest bidder. They will receive a contract.
Well, we've been talking about that on the show and the great interest that absolute auctions bring. And so those properties, I think it was 79 properties for a bank. If they're absolute, I'm sure they brought a lot of attention, a lot of interest. I'm sure the bank did well. I'm sure the purchases did well, because if it's absolute, what that means is it's going to sell no matter what. So you have a vested interest as a buyer to make sure that you've seen the property, you've done your homework, you've got comparables from the real estate brokers that you're working with, and you've got your money ready and your financing ready to buy the property, and that's the wonderful way to go. And so congratulations. Do you have any other upcoming auctions?
We do have an upcoming auction for December the 4th. It's got residential properties and some personal property with it. They have about, I'd say, looks around 8 residential properties up and 1 commercial. And it's going to be here locally in Moultrie, Georgia.
Okay.
And it is online, and people have already started bidding on properties, so they can go to the website.
Wow. So what is the website?
It's RowellAuctions.com.
And is there a telephone number that they could talk to you or maybe the auction representative that's involved with that auction?
Absolutely, and that's 800-323-8388.
Give it to us one more time.
Sure, 800-323-8388.
Oh, great. Allison, thank you so much, number one, for giving us this Rowell Auctions report. Number two, for being such a fine executive producer for this show and making us all look good, not only me, but the people who are guests. You do work for putting slides together, putting it on YouTube, and then, kind of really working on the production of the show. How do you do that?
Well, after creating the slides, I have to animate them together and combine them and edit the audio and actually listen to everything in detail to make sure everything goes together very smoothly and making sure the photos look great and their bios are correct. And it turns out to be a wonderful show. Well,
you do it very well, and when we get the show on YouTube, the people who did the interview are very impressed, and they send it out to their friends and their clients, and so good job on your part for representing Rowell Auctions and the radio show so well.
Thank you, Doug.
All right, you have a great weekend,
You too.
And I thank you again for calling in.
All right, Doug. Take care.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.
All right, that was Allison Marchetti, Again, she's the executive producer of this radio show. Makes us all look good. It's, she gave a 1-sentence, 2-sentence thing on what she does to put the show together, but it's much more difficult. And she listens to the show. The show is sent from the radio station WFOI 1240 to her, and then she gets background information from each of the interview guests. She puts it all together. She gets a photo, and then very creatively she puts on these slides that go on to a YouTube presentation. She does a great job, and so Allison, thank you so much. All right, we're going to be back next week. Appreciate you listening. See you next Friday.